Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into one of history's most baffling, tragic, and downright bizarre military campaigns, the Fourth Crusade. Imagine signing up for a holy war to reclaim Jerusalem, only to end up sacking the largest Christian city in the world. How did it all go so spectacularly wrong? Stick around because this story is a wild ride of ambition, debt, and betrayal. It all starts in 1198. The powerful Pope Innocent III, dismayed by the failures of previous crusades, calls for a new one, but this time there's a new strategy. Forget the long, grueling overland march through Anatolia. The plan is to hit the heart of Muslim power, the Ayyubid Sultanate in Egypt. The idea was brilliant. Conquer the rich lands of the Nile and then trade them for Jerusalem. It was a bold, strategic move, and a call to arms went out across Europe. Knights and nobles from France and Flanders answered the call. Leaders like Boniface of Montferrat and Baldwin of Flanders gathered their forces. But there was one huge logistical problem. How do you get a massive army from Europe to Egypt? The answer lay with the maritime superpower of the age, the Republic of Venice. The Crusader leaders struck a deal with the Venetians. Venice would build a massive fleet and transport an army of over 33,000 men, complete with horses and supplies. The price tag for this colossal undertaking? A staggering 85,000 silver marks. The contract was signed, the shipbuilders of Venice got to work, and everyone prepared for the grand departure in the summer of 1202. But when summer arrived, a crisis emerged. Instead of the expected 33,000 soldiers, only about 12,000 showed up in Venice. Many knights had decided to make their own way to the Holy Land, or simply never left home. This shortfall wasn't just a military problem, it was a financial catastrophe. The Crusaders pooled all their money, but could only scrape together a fraction of the agreed-upon price. They were broke, stranded in Venice, and indebted to the most powerful naval force in the Mediterranean. This is where one of history's most cunning figures enters the stage. Enrico Dandolo, the Doge of Venice. He was over 90 years old and blind, but his mind was as sharp as a razor. He saw the Crusaders' desperation not as a problem, but as an opportunity. He made them an offer they couldn't refuse. He said, effectively, "You can't pay us in silver? Fine, pay us in service." Dandolo had a target in mind, the city of Zara, on the Dalmatian coast. Today, it's Zadar in Croatia. Zara was a Christian city and a commercial rival to Venice, which had recently rebelled against Venetian control and placed itself under the protection of the King of Hungary, who ironically had also taken the cross and was technically a participant in the crusade. Dandolo proposed that the Crusaders help Venice recapture Zara. In return, their debt would be postponed. Many Crusaders were horrified. Attacking a fellow Christian city? This wasn't what they signed up for. But they were trapped. With little choice, they agreed. In November 1202, the great crusading fleet meant to fight for the Holy Land laid siege to the Christian city of Zara. When Pope Innocent III heard the news, he was furious. He strictly forbade the attack and threatened excommunication. The Crusaders ignored him, and Zara was sacked. The Pope followed through on his threat, excommunicating the entire army. The Fourth Crusade had taken its first dark turn. This was the moment the holy mission began to unravel. While the Crusader army wintered in Zara, a new, even more tempting diversion presented itself. A young Byzantine prince named Alexios Angelos arrived at their camp with a dramatic story and an incredible proposal. Back in Constantinople, his father, Emperor Isaac II, had been overthrown, blinded, and imprisoned by his own brother, who now ruled as Alexios III. The young prince had escaped and was seeking Western help to reclaim his family's throne. His offer to the Crusaders was almost too good to be true. "Help me," he promised, "and I will give you everything you need." He pledged to pay off their entire debt to Venice with 200,000 silver marks. He would provide 10,000 Byzantine soldiers to join their crusade to Egypt. He would even submit the Eastern Orthodox Church to the authority of the Pope in Rome, ending the great schism that had divided Christianity for centuries. For the Crusader leaders, this was a golden opportunity. It solved their money problems and promised to strengthen their army for the real mission. For Doge Dandolo and the Venetians, it was even better. Venice had old scores to settle with the Byzantine Empire and was well aware of the legendary, unimaginable wealth stored behind the walls of Constantinople. The decision was made. The Crusade would be diverted once again. The fleet set sail not for Egypt, but for the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. In the summer of 1203, the citizens of Constantinople awoke to a terrifying sight: a massive fleet of Crusader and Venetian warships filling the waters before their city. They had never expected an attack from fellow Christians. The Crusaders launched their assault, and in July, they breached the famous Theodosian walls. The usurper emperor, Alexios III, panicked, gathered what treasure he could, and fled the city. With the tyrant gone, the gates were opened. The Crusaders freed the blind Isaac II from his dungeon and placed him back on the throne, with his son, the young prince, crowned as co-emperor Alexios IV. The Crusaders had succeeded. They set up camp outside the city walls and waited for their reward. But the celebration was short-lived. When Alexios IV actually looked into the imperial treasury, he discovered it was nearly empty. His predecessor had cleaned it out. To make good on his extravagant promises, the new emperor had to resort to desperate measures. He melted down priceless church icons and holy relics for their gold and silver and imposed crushing new taxes on the populace. The citizens of Constantinople, who already deeply distrusted the Latins camped outside their walls, were outraged. Riots broke out in the streets. The situation grew more and more tense. The Crusaders were growing impatient, and the Byzantines were growing hostile. In January 1204, the whole arrangement collapsed. A fiery anti-Latin nobleman, known as Alexios Mourtzouphlos, led a palace coup. The young emperor, Alexios IV, was overthrown, imprisoned, and later strangled. His blind father, Isaac II, died around the same time, likely from shock. Mourtzouphlos seized the throne as Emperor Alexios V. His first act was to tell the Crusaders they wouldn't get another single coin. He declared all agreements null and void and began launching attacks on their camp. The Crusaders were now in an impossible position. They were deep in hostile territory, their supplies were running low, and their promised payment was gone forever. Their former ally was dead, and a new, aggressive emperor was on the throne. They saw only one way out: to take the city for themselves. They decided that if they couldn't get their payment from the Byzantines, they would simply take the city and all its fabled wealth. The Holy Crusade was about to descend into one of the most horrific sacks in history. On April 12, 1204, the Crusaders and Venetians launched their final all-out assault on the walls of Constantinople. After fierce fighting, they broke through. What followed over the next 3 days was a frenzy of destruction, greed, and violence that shocked the Christian world. The Crusaders, who had sworn an oath to protect the innocent, ran riot. They massacred thousands of civilians. Churches, monasteries, and palaces were plundered. The magnificent Hagia Sophia, the heart of Orthodox Christianity, was desecrated. Holy relics, gathered over centuries, were stolen and shipped back to Western Europe. Ancient bronze statues were melted down for coin. Priceless libraries containing irreplaceable works of ancient Greek philosophy and literature were put to the torch. The famous 4 bronze horses that once stood in the Hippodrome were looted by the Venetians and taken to Venice, where you can still see them today atop St. Mark's Basilica. It was a complete and utter catastrophe. The greatest and wealthiest Christian city on earth was systematically dismantled by an army that was supposed to be fighting for Christendom. After the pillage, the Crusaders set about dividing their spoils. They had no intention of continuing to Egypt or Jerusalem. Instead, they carved up the Byzantine Empire for themselves. They established a new Latin Empire of Constantinople, and Baldwin of Flanders was crowned its first emperor. Venice was the biggest winner, receiving 3/8 of the empire, including strategic islands like Crete and exclusive trading rights that made it the master of Mediterranean commerce. The Fourth Crusade, which had begun with a call to liberate Jerusalem, ended with the destruction of a rival Christian empire for political and commercial gain. The consequences were devastating and long-lasting. The Byzantine Empire was shattered. Although it was restored in 1261, it was a shadow of its former self and never fully recovered, leaving it fatally weakened for its final fall to the Ottoman Turks in 1453. The deep-seated mistrust between Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic Christians, which had been growing for centuries, turned into a permanent, bitter hatred. The Schism of 1054 became an unhealable wound. To this day, in Greece, the memory of 1204 evokes a sense of betrayal. Not a single crusader from this expedition ever set foot in the Holy Land. The original crusading ideal, already tarnished, was completely shattered. Pope Innocent III was initially furious, but he eventually, reluctantly, had to accept the new reality of a Latin empire in the East. The Fourth Crusade stands as a grim monument to how a noble cause can be corrupted by greed, debt, and political ambition. It's a story not of holy war, but of a heist on a world historical scale. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating and tragic as I do, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next dive into history. Let me know in the comments what you think. Was this the greatest betrayal in medieval history? See you next time.